So, as our policy, we thank our sponsors, which is Epson, Photo Shelter, Archive Magazine, Pro Photo Daily, and American Photography. So this is the fourth night of our presentations of guns in America, and we've had some incredible presentations so far. David Bertow, Carlos Ortez, John Lowenstein, Kathy Scherer, and tonight we have Pulitzer Prize winning photographer Barbara Davidson. And I cannot thank you enough, Barbara, for coming in and doing this with us. It's really a treat to have someone of your caliber to be with us. So each night before we started, I just want to read a couple of very quick facts about guns in America, and then we can start. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms reports that 9.3 million firearms were manufactured in the United States in 2015. 44% of Americans say they personally know someone who has been shot with a gun, either accidentally or intentionally. And lastly, 27 people were killed by guns in America on Christmas Day in 2015, which is equal to the total number of people killed in homicides in an entire year in Austria, New Zealand, Norway, Slovenia, Estonia, Bermuda, Hong Kong, and Iceland combined. Just a little bit of background. Barbara, the stage is yours. Thank you again for doing this, Barbara.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much for having me. And everyone, thank you for coming. I appreciate you, your interest in gun violence in this country, because I think it's a health epidemic, and I'm really glad you're interested in hearing all of the speakers. So shall we, Frank, one technical thing. I'm seeing people pop. Okay, you're taking care of the people coming into the
you just have to worry about your presentation.
Don't even look at it. Okay, cool. So we're sharing screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So let me change this view. I want to change the view. It's in my screen. Hang on. That's fine. Let me just change how I see the screen. Okay. So tonight we're talking about gun violence in America, and you're probably wondering, why do I have this photo of this woman from Somalia? I want to give you the full context as to how I became involved in covering gun violence in this country. When I first started working in the United States, a lot of the coverage I did was around the world. I was covering people affected by violence, covering a lot of conflict, a lot of natural disasters, and I was really deeply immersed in the culture of violence abroad, or mostly abroad, not really at home. And then I moved I got a job at the Los Angeles Times in 2007. And in a way, I was really grateful, because I thought, okay, great, I could be like everybody else. I could have a normal life. I don't have to be on the road 6 months out of the year. And I thought, cool. And the reason why I felt that way is because I knew the LA Times had their own A team, and I knew I was coming in not as one of the main leading traveling photographers. So I was like, awesome, great. I can just chill at home. And so I really pivoted from covering all of this violence to getting a dog and thinking, cool, I'm going to have a normal life. Not so much. In 2007, when I moved to Los Angeles, very shortly after I got here, I became introduced to a woman named Rose Smith. Rose Smith lived in Watts, Los Angeles, and she had been shot in the back. There were a couple of gangs warring. She got hit with stray bullets. She was shot in the back, and she was left paralyzed. At the time, she was pregnant, 3 months pregnant, and she had 2 younger children. So here I am, I enter Rose's life. The detective called the reporter and said, listen, I can't get anyone to write about this story. We're having trouble finding the shooter. Can you come and help us do a story on Rose? So I meet Rose, and I was left really, really, really moved by her story. I couldn't believe that in the United States, naively, that people could be shot in their community in broad daylight, and there were no consequences for this kind of violence. And I really sort of sat with her story, and it really made me realize that, you know, a lot of what's happening in the cities of this country, and I say it in that way because I'm Canadian. I didn't grow up with this level of violence. If someone in my country got shot, it would most likely in 2007 make the front page of the newspaper. I have no idea what's going on there now, but it would have. And so I talked to my editors about it. And I said, listen, this is a serious problem. Like, I left all those war zones overseas. I was really happy to move to Los Angeles and kind of leave that trauma behind. But I realized it was happening here. And I said, I really believe we need to do a comprehensive story about the violence that's happening in a lot of communities of Los Angeles. To give you context, Los Angeles has a community of 10 million people. So after bugging my editors forever, they finally said, okay, all right, after 6 months of me begging and pleading and photographing people on my own time, they said, okay, go out and do your comprehensive story. So for this particular lecture or talk or conversation, I'm going to speak to you about this body of work that I did from 2007 until probably 2015. Then I'm going to show you a second body of work that I've continued. I've kind of been obsessed with gun violence in this country for a very long time. I've been covering the issues for about 2 decades. So what I'm going to do now is just show you a little film to get a sense of what was happening in Los Angeles, a very segregated city. And I'm going to introduce you to some of the people through this very, very short trailer. I made a 30-minute film. It was a multimedia piece, but I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I'm just going to show you the little trailer, and hopefully it works smoothly.
Okay, who got shot? Okay, so that was how many people can't listen to me. I'm gonna give you instructions on what to do, but you need to calm down. Hello? Hello? Doctor, can't help me. I'll talk to you later.
It was my grandma's birthday. I came out outside and then I got shot in the head.
I think the worst part is this idea of seeing that gun in his face.
It's when we heard like 4 to 5 gunshots.
All I remember telling her at that point was, baby, please don't leave me. I need you.
It seems too close and like too loud and real. So we both like dug down and we just saw everyone running. She called my name. And I like turned around and I saw her and she was just laying on the floor.
Only thing I could think of was, God, please let me die right now. I have a baby inside of me.
How bad could hell be? If this is what's going on, killing and raping and robbing and just, this must be it.
One homicide, gang-related homicide, costs the county $1.7 million. And that's from the beginning of the investigation, the burial, the arrest, the incarceration, just for one homicide. The gang is in the community. It's a part of the community, and the community has to address it as a community issue, not a them issue or a they issue, but it's all of our issue, and we have to collectively work with it together.
Okay. Sit. Just 1 second. Hang on, turn this on. Sorry. We had a little hiccup with this before, and it seems to Frank be giving me a hiccup again. I can't get, here we go. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the statistics. I know people fall asleep when we talk about statistics, but I think it's imperative to give you an understanding of what's really happening, the broader picture. So while the perception may be that mass shootings in this country are the largest share of gun deaths, in reality, they are just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
Oops. More than 99% of gun deaths in the US are from shootings other than mass shootings. So think about that. When we put it into context, we see the media is obsessed with mass shootings. Of course we can appreciate that. Of course we can understand that. Of course that makes sense. You know, this lunatic guns down 23 children. Of course we're going to be appalled. But in reality, these shootings are a very small portion of what's happening in this country. The fabric of this country is mostly the gun violence we see is everyday gun violence, domestic, suicide, crime, gang violence. This is what makes up the larger numbers. And the sad reality of this, people in this demographic, their stories rarely get told. And if you look at these statistics, it's pretty appalling. And not only are people getting shot and killed, the amount of people that are actually surviving their wounds is astronomical. We're starting to see an entire population of walking wounded, people who they survived these horrific shootings. And that's kind of the community that I'm really interested in documenting, because I really feel when we see these mass shootings, the narrative is mostly, you know, if it's a huge shooting, it lasts for a week. And then we learn about the shooter, we learn about their manifesto, and then we learn about those who have died, but we rarely see and hear about the survivors. I am interested in the trauma that a lot of people live with. People live with their whole entire lives after a family member, like in this situation, a young brother was killed. And how does that play out? Well, we see it play out in all kinds of ways. This is a situation in Los Angeles. There are certain corridors within this city where gun violence is so commonplace that it's just life and death live side by side with one another. For instance, on the left of this photo, you see a makeshift memorial for a vendor who was killed because he didn't pay gang taxes. And on the right, it's this beautiful life passage, a woman celebrating her quinceanera. And when I started to see the casualness of this kind of violence and how it's not being talked about, these stories are not being told, I started to visually investigate, well, why is that? And clearly, because Los Angeles is a segregated city, we see a lot of people living in communities that have suffered under systemic racism for decades and generations. They're the communities that have been left behind. And I believe if this kind of violence was playing out in Beverly Hills, it would be taken care of immediately, I can assure you. This was for young Danny Farber. He was just out enjoying an afternoon lunch with his girlfriend, and he was shot to death in a restaurant. It was a gang, a gang initiation. But what's so alarming in this photo, you see the kids in his class. Clearly, they should be allowed to enjoy their graduation. It's a big life moment. But Danny on the left, you know, all he has is a bouquet of flowers and a cadet representing him. Oops, I thought I took this out. You're seeing levels of violence in this city that you see in war zones. The thing about this as well is that this kind of work, I did this work, you know, started in 2007, as I said, and it went on. I could be deeply entrenched in communities with high crime and high, you know, domestics, and you're still going to see this. It's still the exact same story. And I remember when I told my editors about this, they said, no, you know what? We're not interested in this story. We don't want to, you know, this is old news. And I said, listen, I showed them this picture and I said, gun violence is a cancer in people's community. it impacts people, and it corrodes, and it impacts everyone in the community. It's not just the person who was shot, it's the friends, it's the teachers, it's the schools. So we're dealing with people who, you know, we're seeing that they're not getting the counseling that they need. They're not getting the assistance that they need. And the problem with this kind of violence is it's forgotten and it's left behind, and we move forward. And we're all guilty of that, because how many times have we, you know, heard about a shooting and we just don't want to hear the whole narrative. We just can't. We can't deal with it, right? We're like, oh my God, I can't deal with this again. And so it's happening to all kinds of people. And this is a story where Melody Ross went to the football game to see, you know, her parents let her go to this game, that first time, 16-year-old kid. And she got shot and killed. And as you saw in the video, this is her friend at her funeral. And you see the impact, right? Those left behind, the guilt that you live with.
So Barbara, you see this as, you know, that's the side effect. It becomes a mental health issue for all these survivors and all these families of the killed human beings.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, the CDC finally designated gun violence as a health epidemic in this country. And until we take the issue seriously and debunk the right-wing agenda of, oh, it's only crime, oh, it's only this. No, that's not true. It's not. That's a right-wing myth. You know, 50% of the crime, 50% of the deaths in this country come from suicide, right? Part of that problem is there is such easy access to these guns that in a moment, you know, you're so distraught and you're like, you want to give up. We've all felt that way. I don't know anybody who hasn't felt that way, but I don't have a gun sitting beside my bed. But if I did, I might use it, is what I'm saying. So I think we have way too easy access to guns. And you're starting to see children, like my little friend Josue here, 4 years old, shot in the head. You know, they live in a community of poverty, right? Well, just because you live in a community of poverty that's impoverished, there's not much economic infrastructure. Well, who's to blame for that? Corporations, businesses. Why aren't you reinvesting in communities where there's high crime, right? Just being completely neglected. And so part of the problem is, you know, they say to people, well, move out of there, get out of that neighborhood. Well, who has the money in Los Angeles to actually have the first months, the last months, and then to move, right? So we're talking about gun violence is related to economic issues as well. You start to see really weird things playing out. You know, it becomes very political in Los Angeles. When you're killed, the coroner decides if this was a true act of crime or were you a gang member. And if you were a gang member, then you don't get access to the victims' rights funds. And this particular family, Danny Farber's death, they had to wait a month to get their child out of the morgue because of the bog down with the paperwork. You know, so you're a victim, you're in the wrong place, the wrong time, you get shot, and then you have to go on with your life with very little infrastructure. And these funerals are insanely expensive because you want to honor your child in the best way you can, right? Of course, your child's died. So I also think that as a photographer, when you're covering issues that are incredibly sensitive like this, you really have to be mindful about not reinforcing stereotypes, about not being a dignity robber. And you know, people are impacted by violence, and you have, there's a lot of listening. It takes a lot of time to tell a story like this. And I remember saying to my colleagues at the Los Angeles Times, I remember saying, you know, why didn't any of you guys tell this story? This story is so important, and it's plaguing our neighborhoods. And why aren't you telling the stories of the survivors? And I think that's a huge problem with gun violence in this country, right? We are not reinvesting economically in communities that have high levels of crime. We are not reinvesting in mental health services for survivors. We are acting as though, well, it happened to them, it didn't happen to me. But as we see, it can happen to any of us. This was for a little 4-year-old, Aaron. You know, I have to be honest with you, telling a lot of the intimacy of these stories they're really hard to hear because they're so unbelievably tragic. Like Aaron was a 4-year-old kid playing in his backyard. He was wearing his Spider-Man outfit. It was Halloween and he got shot by a stray bullet. And this is happening as I'm giving you this lecture. It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in DC. It's happening in Vermont. It happens everywhere in the world.
Barbara, how did you get access to these families? How did you build that trust? I mean, and when you didn't really have a lot of time, right? I mean, because some of these situations happen. There's a funeral. I mean, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And first of all, the person telling the story has to be completely committed to tell the story, right? I was the reporter on this story. I was the photographer on this story. I was the videographer on this story. And so it really punched me out of my comfort zone, but I felt so driven to tell it that I did the research. I reached out to gang intervention workers, and gang interventionists are the people who work in communities where there's a lot of gang activity. In Los Angeles, look, our gun violence is predominantly gang related, right? That's just our city. That's just what it is. And so depends where you are in the city. So I would work with them and I would say, listen, I want to meet families who have been impacted by this violence because I believe it's really important to talk about. You know, it's gun violence, but to contextualize it for Los Angeles, my editors were calling it gang violence. It is gang related violence, but it's all gun violence. It's one and the same, right? And so I'm back in the community working. I'm working in different communities on another piece that I'm going to show you a little bit later on. But they're really starting to do deep studies about what is happening in communities for children, how this kind of violence is impacting them, how we're not addressing the cycle of violence for these children, right? This little fella, his brother Albert, was killed right in front of his house. So these two kids, his younger brothers, are playing out this violence, right? Every kid plays with a gun, I get it. But this is different because their brother was killed. This was a day before their brother's funeral. So what's happening is you're seeing these kids go to school, they don't get the help they need, they don't get the psychology that they need. Then they start to fade away from the mainstream because they can't concentrate, they're tired. So I think they are so vulnerable. They are so vulnerable, ironically, to repeat the violence that they've experienced.
So that speaks to this cycle that you're speaking about, right? And in these communities, are the mental health workers trying to break that cycle, and how do they do that?
Well, I think what's happening now, which I'm so happy about, because I'm starting to work with some cops and a prosecutor who, what they are doing is fascinating. They are starting to create a team. When a child gets shot or a child witnesses violence in one particular neighborhood of Los Angeles called Watts, they have a lot of housing projects there. So what is LAPD has changed the way they're policing, because we all know that's a whole issue in itself. So they're trying to create an environment where they do community policing. What does that look like? You get to know the gang members in the community. You get to know the parents in the community. You get to know the kids in the community. Of course, you got to arrest people when they do bad stuff, but it's not this like RoboCop mentality where you go in, you bust everybody, you pull everybody out. It's not that sensibility. It's a small portion of what they're doing, but they're trying, and they're starting to see that that is lowering the level of violence. So I'm so happy to hear that a lot of the kids that are impacted by violence now, they're actually getting the counseling that they need. There are these reach teams that go out and help these kids heal, right? I mean, that's really the important thing, helping these kids heal.
And they feel like they have the resources to continue that kind of an effort?
You know, that's really interesting. You know, they're always hungry for money, right?
Yeah.
But the prosecutor I just spoke to yesterday, she reached out to me and she's so happy. She told me they just wrote a $5 million grant and they got it. When Trump was, this is not political, but when Trump was in power, he cut off a lot of the money for California for any kind of benefits because he hated California. So now the money is starting to roll around again. So I'm really encouraged, and I think it sends a message that we have to really rethink how we police in this country, because the Rambo cop way of doing things is clearly not working. So that was a project that I worked on for a very long time. I still work on it I'm still working on it, reintroducing myself to it. But this is a new project that I'm working on. I'm really, like I say, my life's work will always center around the theme of gun violence. I recently received a Guggenheim Fellowship, and I had pitched an idea to them like a madwoman that I thought we should take 8x10 film portraits of survivors all across the country, because the Los Angeles Times really gave me a narrow corridor of what I could talk about in the project that I did a deep dive on, that they ran 7 pages worth. They were so committed to it in the end. I'm so grateful. But it was really survivors of gang violence, when I believe that the gang members themselves are part of the equation and they should have their story told as well. So this is a different chapter of gun violence. And this chapter for me is all about making the story national, letting people see a much broader take on who this is happening to. I don't want to play into the right-wing agenda. Oh, that happens in impoverished Black and brown communities. They're all criminals, right? So that was a chapter of, let's say, a book that I thought was important at the time that I told it, but I'm kind of broadening out now, and I'm telling the story about who are the people across the country that this level of violence is happening to. So what I did, like a madwoman, I decided to do 8x10 photography. Why? Because I really loved the formal setting of photographing people. It's incredible, right? And I think that most of these people, if they're lucky, they've had a couple of lines in the paper that says, oh, they were shot and this is what happened. But the majority of survivors never get a lick written about them in any media. They've completely forgotten, as I've said, and then they have to go on with their own life. But I wanted people to have the experience. I envisioned this project as a big exhibition where the pictures would be like, you know, life size, and people would come in, and it was my way of introducing people to who the survivors are, right? Because I wanted people to walk into the room, not with the negative stereotype of, oh, this happens to them and them and them. I wanted people to say, oh shit, this could be my grandmother. Oh, this could be my sister. Oh, this could be my brother. So I really made a conscientious effort of trying to photograph the everyday person who was doing their everyday thing and they got shot. So in this particular incident, she's dressed as the Palm Queen because she was shot at the age of 14. In Utah, she was, you know, these 2 boys, schoolmates, they went for a walk and one of them pulled out a .22 and shot her in the back of the head. She was left in a ditch to die for 8 hours. It was really cold in there. And she survived miraculously. She's had about 40 surgeries, and they made her the homecoming queen for when she was graduating. So that was a big deal for her. I started to do a lot of statistics. Where is the violence coming from? Who is it happening to? Where is it mostly happening to? In St. Louis in 2020, a lot of children were being shot. So I wanted to explore that story. This was a road rage incident. These 2 young girls were in the backseat of the car with their father and mother. No, the mother and the father were driving a wacko. They got into a road rage, came up to the car, killed the parents, killed the guy sitting in the back. The little beautiful girl on the left, she was shot, and she was shot because she jumped on her little sister to her right. She wanted to make sure that she was safe, and she got shot in the head. And now Denaya is, she has permanent brain damage, and this is her little sister with her. So just to give you context how I told this story, I drove from Los Angeles all the way to Florida and in between in my car, packed my studio lights, packed my 8x10. My friend Rod Koulis is, you know, he taught me how to use the Arca Swiss technology, a beautiful 8x10 camera. And so, yeah, this was so out of my comfort zone, totally different from what I was used to doing. And so I wanted people to meet the people who I met. This is Sergeant Sigler. He was on the base in Texas when the lunatic psychiatrist went nuts and started shooting up at the base. And he was a really sharp guy. He had done tours in Afghanistan and tours in Iraq, and just a really good guy. And, you know, his life changed in a minute after he was shot. And he was given a Purple Heart for being shot in Texas. Really crazy.
And Barbara, give us a sense of your research, how you find these people, and, you know, how long does it take to actually get the access, and you know, just a little bit of background on that.
Well, it's really hard because, like I say, survivors are already rarely written about, right? So it's super hard to find these people. And then folks are really nervous about approaching people who have been shot because they think, oh, we're, you know, they don't want to be bothered. Of course they want to be bothered, because everybody's kind of walked away because they don't know what to say to them. So of course they want to tell their story. Of course they want to speak to the media. Of course they want to say, look what happened to me. This is an injustice. So of course they want to speak to us. So I basically, you know, I deep dive. I read any media reports I can find. I deep dive. I reach out to detectives in certain cities. I call public information officers. So I really call gang intervention workers, cops. I read the newspaper. You know, I do everything I can to find out.
Yeah, and Barbara, is there, aside from that person being shot, is there any other common denominator that, you know, makes you interested in that particular subject? You know, as of someone who was shot.
Well, I'm always interested in telling a well-rounded story, right? So it has to be something that registers with me. This particular Texas story, I covered that shooting. I was working at the Dallas Morning News. So I have an intimate connection with that. I was there after it went down. And I just think the irony of this country, this soldier who served overseas, survives, but comes home and is shot on the base and given a Purple Heart. So I'm really struck by the irony of that situation. And I think if that doesn't suggest to people that we're living in an undeclared war zone in this country, then nothing will. We have a war at home that we need to start thinking about and we need to start addressing. This is Pinky, 25-year-old transgender woman, was shot 5 times, literally in broad daylight, outside a gas station in Houston, Texas, right? And then I start to read statistics. Well, what's happening? Who is getting shot? And transgender women of color are targeted. They are targeted. So here she is, she survived. You can see the big scar on her neck and on her hands, but she was shot 5 times. So they're actively being targeted, yet very little is done to stop it. So I mix and match, right? Like I do a lot of stories of people who were just randomly shot, whether it be crime, whether it be a domestic violence situation, whether it's a hate crime. You know, Pinky was, that was a hate crime. This Rabbi Goldstein here, some crazy lunatic walked into a synagogue and started shooting everybody. So we're starting to see a lot of these hate crimes. I wanted to introduce you to Miracle. This is her mom, Rose Smith, whom I told you about. This is her on the left as a baby. Her mother was born, Miracle survived miraculously because her mother was shot in the back and she was 3 months pregnant, but Miracle survived. They named her Miracle. She was born drug addicted because they had to give her mother medicine because, you know, her jaw was shot, she was paralyzed, she was in a lot of pain. And so I asked her to be part of my project because of course I stay in touch with some of these families, right? So Coco just graduated from middle school, so I'm really happy, and yeah, she's still part of the project. Alex, Parkland, the shooting at the school there, horrific school shooting. So I try to get a cross section of people, right? Like I thought, oh, the biggest mass shooting was in Las Vegas, so I'm going to try to find someone there. And you know, through word of mouth, I found a couple. I'm not going to show all of these pictures because they're going to run soon, so I can't show them all. I don't want to give them all away. A cop, Misty McBride, some lunatic in Dallas attacked the police. He didn't like what they were doing, and he shot 5 of them. And Misty agreed to be photographed by me. These are all by my 8x10 camera. Josue, the little boy I showed you earlier on with the scar on his head, we're still close. And so this is him as a teenager at 14 years old. But you have to understand, I cannot stress enough how people that this happens to, people like us abandon them. And that's not right. We have to get on board with fighting this issue. Here's Davian, a young man outside his church. He was 16 years old when he got shot. Here he is as an adult. I'm happy to say he's a father now, 28 years old on the right, and he was 16 on the left. He's a father of 2. A lot of these people are incredibly inspirational, right? Like, oh my God, if I got shot, I don't know if I could go on and just continue on with life like they do. But the perseverance is really what I find inspiring.
Yeah, Rod put in there that when you display these images, they're 6 by 8 feet. That must be unbelievable.
Yeah. I have one that is that big, and I don't have the whole series that's big because, you know, I'm looking for a space. I've got a sponsor to help print them, but you know, so anybody out there that wants to help make this a reality, my God, I would be so happy. So I'm just going to end. I'd love to hear some Q&A, but after I show this work, I always feel bad, right? It's like, oh my God, I leave everybody feeling so depressed. And I even sort of pull back a lot. I really don't go too deep into the stories of the people I photograph because it's so traumatic to have such a collection of stories like this. So I'm starting to try to end lectures by saying, you know, how can you get involved to curb gun violence, right? I think it's incredibly important to not feel there's nothing you can do because we, the people, there's a lot that we can do. And so it's so important to lobby Congress to pass gun safety laws and red flag laws, right? This is really, really important. Demand background checks on all gun sales. If we can do these tiny little things, and of course, you can volunteer with Everytown USA or Moms Demand or Giffords. I think a lot of people, you know, just Google, you can volunteer. There's so many small things you can do. You can volunteer an hour a week. But if we all did that, just think of how much better we would make this crisis for a lot of people. Anyway, I believe that this is it's all of our responsibility. It's not only for the people who have been shot. It's not for only Gabby Giffords to get up there and tell us we need to do something about this. She's such a big hero and inspiration for me. And so I'm happy to bow out now and take any questions.
Okay, so stop sharing and we can unmute anybody. Just raise your hands if with any question. You know, so the cycle that you talk about, how do we break that cycle, and what's a normal first step? Barbara, what do you think? We'll get Justin next.
Well, I think we have to get involved. You know, the last couple of things that I said, I think we can't pretend it happens to them and it doesn't happen to us because it's going to happen to all of us at some point, right? I mean, it could. I mean, do you know during COVID, like violence has spiked exponentially? I'm working on a new. Oh, you mute some of these guys. What's happening now is that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because all these faces are popping up on my screen. I'm gonna. Okay, good. This is better. How can you? Of course, it's a cycle. I mean, because gun violence, you know, gun ownership is a cult in this country. And this bastardization of the Second Amendment needs to stop. You know, that's part of the problem. And I think I'm not against guns. You know, I use guns too. I'm not against guns. I'm against guns that are used for crimes and violence. I'm
against guns.
Huh?
Oh, that's somebody else. So,
That's fine. That's fine. So what I'm saying is, if we push this agenda that we have to lock up everybody's guns, I don't think we're going to win. But if we push the agenda for gun safety, I think we can. And I think it's a slow moving, it's slow moving, but I think we have to get involved. Like, look what I do. I speak a lot about gun violence. I introduce people to the survivors, to what's happened to them or what's happened to their families. But come on, if I'm interested in cars, what am I going to do? I'm going to go out, I'm going to join a car club, I'm going to figure it out, right? You know, Mom's Demand is in every single city. You can make calls, you can help lobby Congress people. These are not difficult things that are going to take you out of your daily life, right?
yeah, you're right. Jason has a question.
Yeah, it seems like, unfortunately, the worst ones, the mass shootings, the gang-related ones, are all in somewhat relatively small communities. To what extent, you know, in the experience, the long experience you've had doing this, do the victims that you're able to get so close to, do they recognize or know on any personal level any of the perpetrators, or, you know, is it because we've seen so many of them come out with manifestos and a lot of social media posts, and it seems like that would make them, to me, pretty well known in a small community. But I'm just wondering, you know, what your experience is with what sort of relationship, if any, you know, these perpetrators have had with their victims.
The people that I know and I photographed, the hundreds probably that I photographed, they don't know the perpetrators mostly, right? I think in domestic violence, I photographed a young woman, a domestic violence case, and her boyfriend shot her. So clearly she knows that, right? But I think a lot of people that I've documented, it is random, right? And so a lot of them don't know who the shooter is. And these mass shootings, as a member of the media, I think we should stop even publishing their names. I don't care who these creeps are. We don't need to know anything about them. We don't need to know about their manifesto. I don't care about their manifesto sitting on Facebook. If we don't know anything about them, we eliminate copycat killers. And if people think there are no copycat killings happening in this country, they're in total denial. So these people who, I just get so angry. And they say it's mental illness. Look, I have mental illness in my family, okay? They don't pick up guns and kill people. It's easy access to guns. That's the problem. And that's what we need to do. We need to lobby for background checks more and more and more. Why do we need AR-15s? We don't need those kind of guns. Not in a city like Los Angeles. We need them in the war zone. I understand that. So that's one. Two, I think we need to learn more about the people that this is happening to. So we humanize them. So we think twice about it. So we get angry. So we lobby. So we try to change it, right? When we only hear about these creeps with their manifestos, it's gory. It's like, it's why do we want to know about them? I don't want to know about them. Clearly, they're unhinged, you know.
Why do we know about it ahead of time? Why are we finding out about it later?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're absolutely right. And that's where we, all of us in this room, have an obligation to, if you know, like, I don't want if I had kids, I don't want them owning a gun, having the gun in the house. I understand people want protection, and that's perfectly fine. Lock them up safely. I'm lobbying for safe gun ownership. That's all we're asking. We're not saying take your guns away. It's just safe gun ownership. And so there are a lot of domestics, you know, when you say, do they know, do the survivors or the deceased know their victims? Unfortunately, a lot of the women do, and it's a lot of men killing them. You don't see a lot of women showing up with guns, spraying kids in schools. It's men. And I think as community, men have to start speaking out to their colleagues when they see they're a little on edge, and be like, man, you need to chill. There's a lot of misogyny in this country, and that's part of the problem. That's why a lot of women are getting shot. So, you know, you may not want to go to Congress and lobby for, you know, stricter gun laws, but you know, if you hear your neighbor or your friend or your brother or someone who's starting to use language that's very aggressive against women and they own guns, you might want to, you know, speak to them. We all have a responsibility to speak up.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because what's his name? John Lowenstein who was on the other night, was talking about like getting away from just the act, but everything around the act. Like you say, if you start to see someone speaking more aggressively to their wife, you know, that may be a signal. But I have to say, somebody, Cherie Ryan, has just come in, and she is a mom of someone who was killed.
Oh, wow. Great. I want to hear from her.
Yeah, I believe that's that is her. Jay, if we can unmute Miss Ryan's, that would probably be a good thing. Yes, so I mean, the point is, we all, I mean, it's our responsibility, all of us, right, to do something.
But the
You know,
thing is, we all live in our own little bubbles, right? We're all taking care of our kids. We're all taking care of our parents. We're all taking care of our family. It's this very tribal thought, the way we think, right? We've all got a lot of stuff on our plate. We've all got stress. We're all looking for work, whatever that is that you're experiencing. And that's valid and completely true. But this is a national health epidemic. We all need to get involved. We had the pandemic. We all wore masks. We all got shots. We all did our thing. We all, not all of us, but you know, the majority of us hopefully did. So I think it's just, we need to get involved. We need to get involved. I mean, Mary Himes is here. She's a great, she knows, you know, Mary, do you want to chime in about some of the things we can do to help curb some of the violence? Mary's, you know, she has a lot of programs that educate people about gun violence through art.
Yeah, hey, Barbara. It's so nice to see you again, fellow Canadian American.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started a nonprofit. It's been on a little bit of hiatus due to some health issues, but it's called the Unload Foundation, and we try to use the arts to bridge the divide that exists in gun culture in our country, trying to drive conversations using art, because I think, you know, there's so many guns we're awash in guns. There's something like 300 million, 400 million guns in circulation right now. So we're not going to sadly ban any of them because of the Second Amendment. So yes, the more that we can drive the idea of responsible gun ownership through dialogue, if you ask me, through dialogue with responsible gun owners, getting them on board to advocate for better laws. I happen to be married to a member of Congress. Yes, it's insane. He is a Democrat. And so I kind of hear from him, like, how important it is that people advocate for these kinds of issues on a regular basis, on a persistent and a smart way. Like, you show up with facts. If you go to your member of Congress or your state rep or whoever it is, really speak up, because the more they hear from you, the more they'll pay attention to the issue. And so that's, yes, what Barbara said, like, advocate to your politicians, your representatives. And also, I think it's really important, we're never going to convince the evangelical Trump supporting Republicans to support gun safety laws, right? So there's a fraction of independents, moderate Republicans who are swayable. And, you know, go read the Atlantic piece by Ryan Busey. He's an ex-NRA executive. It just dropped like yesterday, the day before. He was at the NRA, and now he's working with Giffords as a gun safety advocate. So we got to get those kind of sensible gun owners speaking up. Matthew McConaughey, awesome, right? He was awesome.
Yeah,
So,
Mary, can you tell us more about your organization? And is it art being created by young people?
So yeah, again, it's been on a hiatus due to some health issues, but so we host, it's called the Unload Foundation.
And we should put that in the chat room, Jay,
Yeah,
so people can see that.
Unload Foundation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we hosted exhibits. So for example, we hosted Guns in the Hands of Artists, which was an exhibit produced by a curator down in New Orleans. And that's traveled around the country a bit. So we hosted that at a university here I'm in Connecticut. Okay. And that was a way, yes, we brought kids in from cities nearby, Bridgeport, Connecticut, very poor city, quite a bit of violence. So we had a whole educational program for kids. We hosted, so a lot of arts events, whether it was JR, I don't know if you guys are all photographers, maybe. JR, the French photographer, did an incredible series. I can't remember the name of the title, but it was on the cover of Time magazine. And it was a video mural, I guess is what you would call it. And he had like 200, yeah, you know, Frank. So he had like 200 people, each they were in, it looked like they were in one space. They were
Right
actually
to left, right? From right to left.
Yes. And
It's
each one had
phenomenal.
their
Phenomenal.
story using a QR code. And so we used that to drive a bunch of conversations that included gun owners. We did do summer workshops for kids in Bridgeport. So one summer they did, they created their own art, and we did an art exhibit about gun violence in their lives. And then the next summer they made this whole public mural, a huge mural that was up at outside City Hall in Bridgeport.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really impactful for those kids. They had to speak in front of a crowd, of 100 people or whatever. And so, yeah, we were doing that, and, a lot of we did film screenings, all that kind of stuff, but as a way, using the arts as a way to drive conversations, hopefully between the two sides.
Yeah, that everyone should really try to find that image, JR, right to left.
Oh.
It really is. It's really, what an incredible idea, and to link it up, was phenomenal. My wife is an art historian, and for the MoMA and the Guggenheim, and she referenced it to me, and it was just great, just absolutely.
What's incredible too is it's online, so anybody can access it.
Yeah, I'm sure Jay is trying to find it now.
I think it's called Guns in America, actually.
Yeah.
Probably.
Frank, I put in the link for unloadusa.org.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, thank you.
Frank, who was the woman who you said was in the room whose son was shot?
Miss Ryan.
Is she still here?
Yes.
There she
I'm
is.
here. Yes.
Hi, Miss Ryans.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, okay. So I don't know what
Tell us your
what I can say.
story.
My story is this. My 18-year-old son and his best friend were murdered. They were gunned down 32 years ago, 1990, leaving a movie theater with Tech 9s. So from that, I advocate. I go to City Hall in Washington and Harrisburg, wherever I can, to speak to the sleeping giants about the effects of guns. So when you said facts, what my facts is this: my son was gunned down with the Tech 9. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my son.
Wow.
And I carry my posters everywhere I go. As a matter of fact, a reporter asked me the other day, so Abby said, I see you all the time in the crowd with your poster. I carry my poster because I want people to see my son. He once lived. He once lived, and he's not forgotten.
Good for you.
I cannot forget him. I'm his mom. I cannot forget him, and I'm not going to forget him. As long as I can speak, I will. So that's what my plight in life is. After 32 years, I continue to try to talk to the sleeping giant to wake him up, and I let them know this one day. Let them know this: you might look at me and say, "Oh, she's just talking," but God forbid if it happens to you, you don't want to walk in these shoes.
That's right.
You don't want to walk in these shoes.
That's right.
You really don't.
That's
because
right.
there's some shoe. Everybody can't walk this path. It takes some people out. So they need to know that. Need to be a little more compassionate about that. Now, I'm not trying to ask them to take away their Second Amendment rights. You have a right to do that. But the person who got that gun, who should not have been sold anyway, did not have that take my son's life.
That's right. That's right. And that's why it's so important for all of us to get involved, because we need the collectivity of it all.
Yes.
There's 350 million people in this country, just as many guns. So clearly, the odds of something happening to us or someone in our family or someone we know is high.
Very high.
So, it's important to do something about it or try. We're not going to change Congress overnight. Clearly, we all know that. But if you spot someone who seems to be, you know, exhibiting behaviors that are problematic to us, say something. You know, I don't understand how people don't, but I know people are afraid. But it's time for us to speak up, you know?
Yeah, and Ms. Ryans, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your strength and courage
Yeah.
to come on. You know, to find that Zoom again, and that's so. I mean, it speaks volumes about you, and helping motivate us collectively to do something. I mean, your strength is really staggering.
I didn't ask. I always say I didn't ask to be in this club.
That's
I was
right.
put in it. I was put in it. So because I was put in it, I'm gonna make the best of it. I'm gonna come to the party every chance I get and bring my refreshments, which is my son. Bringing my son with me. Everywhere I go, I take my son and his best friend because they did nothing to nobody. Unfortunately, they were associated. They knew somebody who did something, and somebody was looking for that person and surrounded that car with Tech 9s. 5 men opened fire on that car, killing my son and his best friend. My son, who was a first-year student in college, just home for the Labor Day weekend, and never came back from the movie that night.
Yeah.
So because of that, I want to save another mother, even another child from going through this stuff. This is hell. This is hell. But because I want to do something, God gives me strength to continue, and I will do it until he closes my mouth. I will do it.
Amen. And I want to hear from people like you. I don't want to hear about a mass shooter's manifesto. And I don't want to hear about what's happening, with someone who's killed all these people. I don't want to hear anything about them. I don't care about them. They're not worthy of people hearing about them. I want to hear about people like Miss Ryans. And part of the problem is, I'll tell you right now, is the messaging. And who owns the messaging? The media. The media is part of the problem. Cable news, CNN gets more hits when they have these salacious details about these creeps committing these crimes.
Yes.
Ms. Ryans, how long did it take you after the passing of your son to become an advocate?
It took me, unfortunately, they captured 5 men and we had 4 trials. So that took about a year or so. But maybe 2 years after, an advocate from the streets said he wanted me to go to a high school and speak to the high school students. And that's how it actually started. He said, and when I went there and I looked in the eyes of those young men who looked like my son, I said, oh, I know I got to do something. And I had a dream one night. And the dream was my son came to me in a dream and said, Mom, you have to do something. You have to do something. So I hear his voice every time I go out, every time I see a death, I hear his voice saying, Mom, you got to do something. Whatever it is, small as it might be, he said, you got to do something.
What was his name?
Pardon me?
What was his name?
His name was Terrence, and we called him T. Yeah.
T.
Yeah.
We should all T. Ryan.
T. Ryans, yes.
Right? I mean that's who we if we don't think we know anybody, we know somebody. That's right. T. Ryans.
Yeah.
Embed that in our
yeah.
We're calling for T.
And I appreciate you even receiving me so well.
No, of course.
I appreciate that. Because that keeps them alive.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Well, is there any other comments? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Mary?
No, Mary, you're muted, Mary. Unmute. Mary, unmute.
I'm trying. There we go.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yes.
Because it said I wasn't being allowed to unmute myself. As you know, Frank, I live in a very small community, and I keep getting all these emails from, the various shooting sites to donate to their organization. Donations are one thing, but how can I participate actively? I don't know of any local organization. I'm just not aware of it enough. I would like to help. How do I find out how I can best get involved?
What city are you in?
In Mendham, New Jersey.
Oh, you're in New Jersey. There's Mom's Demand is there, eh, Mary? Mom's Demand is
That is
huge.
Mom's Demand.
Mom's Demand, Brady is
Every
no doubt there.
town,
Gifford.
every
Sorry,
town.
can you just slow down a little bit with these so I know, or can you send them via chat so I can find them?
So a lot of the times, Mary, organizations that are involved on the state level in particular, gun safety organizations, they're looking for testimony from residents to help them, you know, if they're trying to pass a law. New Jersey, you're lucky, has really, really good gun laws. So I don't know what they're working on right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if your legislative term is finished, because at least in Connecticut, ours is done. So we're kind of done for the year. But they do always want people to show up at the State House to lobby, you know, state reps, state senators, and then to show up when there's a legislative hearing at the State House.
So basically my involvement would be on a statewide level, not on a nationwide level.
Well, in terms of, I mean, you can go to the Capitol for sure if you get involved with, you know, Moms or Gifford or Brady, one of the national organizations. They no doubt have days where, you know, people can go and lobby members of Congress. But you could do both in a way. The nice thing about the state level engagement is, again, at least in Connecticut, you can often do that just online.
Okay.
So that's sort of an easy thing you can do as well as going to Washington to lobby your members of Congress.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mary, you know, once you start getting involved, it's like a club, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a club, and you become a community. And people are gonna say, hey, Mary, we need you this day. We're demonstrating outside so-and-so's. Can you show up? Hey, Mary.
I
we're
need
having
to
a
find my community. That's what I need.
Yeah,
to do.
go to Mom's Demand is everywhere, man. They are on point. You know, I would
Yeah.
first start with Mom's Demand, and then you'll learn about the culture, and then you can broaden out and go wherever you want to go. But it's like they reach out to me all the time. Hey, Barbara, can you join us for this? They have picnics, they have community, because really it's a grassroots organization, right? That's what makes things change. It's slow moving, but it builds and it grows and it grows. And Mom's Demand is huge now, right, Mary?
It is huge. And all of these groups, you know, if you're on Facebook, you can look for, you know, Mom's Demand New Jersey, or
Okay.
they'll
And
have a chapter.
Can it be grandma's demand too?
Oh, I hope so.
Okay, sounds good.
Can it be annoying grandmothers?
All right, let's just stop right there, Frank.
Sorry,
Thank you
Mary.
very much.
Sorry, Mary. That was a curveball that didn't break. Sorry.
I think everybody demands. It's just, you'll see, and it gives life purpose, right? Like we forget about this, right? Because we get so caught up in our own minutia and blah, blah, blah. And doing something good for someone, it makes us feel better, right? Like sorry?
No, that is a win-win. And your advocacy, you know, on this grassroots level, Barbara, is really compelling, because I think for so many of us, it's intimidating. But like, the way you and Mary bring it to this grassroots efforts, you know, put a pair of shoes on and walk.
Yeah.
Go somewhere and fill out ballots, whatever it is. That's really, you know, and as a politician's wife, you know that's really what matters. And doing artwork and, you know, all those different things really makes the difference.
Yeah, and
Right,
I don't
one
think
at a time.
I don't think it's right for me now to only just give lectures about the people I've met and their stories, because people leave,
Right.
they're emotionally drained, they're exhausted, they're like, oh God, they feel overwhelmed. What can we do? So I've made a pledge to myself that anytime someone asks me to speak about gun culture, to end it by speaking about, well, what are some of the solutions that we can easily participate in to feel like we're doing something? Because it's empowering, right?
It is. It is. Well, this turned out to be another wonderful night. And tomorrow, for everyone who doesn't know, tomorrow we have two other people speaking, two other photographers who are doing this. So, you know, everyone's invited back, and all of these chats are on our YouTube channel, so you can see whatever you've missed. You know, because we've had them all week. But I have to extend a personal invitation to Miss Ryans. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night if you're free. You know,
I'd love to be back. Sure.
all right, then that's a standing invitation. And you know, Ms. Ryans, as it was last night, I'd like you to have the final word.
Oh, wow.
So the stage is yours, and then, but before that, Barbara, thank you so much for doing this and engaging us and motivating us, and for everyone who's contributed. Mary, I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome.
Just wonderful. So, Ms. Ryans, close us out, dear.
Okay, so as a mom and a mom of a murdered child, I solicit everyone to continue to do whatever you do. Nothing is too small. And if you have a plan to do something, do it. Because like I said last night, I wanted to sue the gun manufacturers, and people encouraged me not to. I'm so sorry that I didn't, because maybe I would have put, like I said, got my foot in the door and would have helped stop some of these guns being sold. So whatever you're doing, continue to do it. Don't let anything stop you, because nothing's going to stop me until the Lord until he closes my eyes. That's when I'll stop.
Beautiful.
And thank you so much, Mr. Frank, for allowing me to even say something. I appreciate that. It keeps my son alive.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate you all. I know you've all got busy days, so thank you. This is great. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
to all of you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thanks.